there's nowhere in our society today where constitutional government has been more completely eliminated than in the family, and as a result of the divorce courts.
Yeah. So how do these courts? I mean, so I think everybody like me, I think about a court as a like a criminal case. The
Yeah.
cops have to stop you. They have to read you your rights. You have the right to an attorney. The court's open to the public. There's like a transcript and records and all of that. These courts are different than that. How do these courts operate?
Well, that's right. They're not really courts. In fact, they're effectively administrative agencies. First of all, there's the concept of no-fault justice. No-fault justice is a contradiction in terms. It's an oxymoron. You can't have no-fault justice. In the law, you have to define what is a legal transgression, or justice is not possible. So the courts don't really arrive at a justice. They don't even attempt to administer justice. They apply an administrative procedure. Every family law case, every case of divorce has an automatic outcome. The outcome is predetermined. That's not justice. That's not due process of law. There's only one possible outcome. A divorce is granted. And it's granted without any reference whatsoever to the wrongdoing, the violation of the marital contract, adultery, anything else. It has no reference to the process itself. The divorce will be granted, and the judge. It's basically up to the judge to decide how everything is divvied up. And there's no particular guidelines. There's no particular rules by which it's divvied up. It's just the preference of the judge. So it's a free for all. It's utter legal nihilism. And what it effectively is corruption, because it's the outcomes, the cases are determined according to what is in the best interest of the lawyers, the bar associations, the judges, the psychotherapists, and all of the others in the divorce industry.
How do we get here? Because I know, like in the 19th century, it was quite difficult to get a divorce. You had to have a reason to get a divorce, and I've read some interesting studies of the era saying that, like, even if like one spouse, confessed to having an affair in order to be, they might actually say, no, you didn't really have an affair. You're manufacturing a pretext. You're manufacturing. You would lie that you'd had to do something wrong in order to get out of this marriage, and so it was extremely difficult to dissolve a marriage in a lot of ways. How do we get to this regime that you're talking about from there?
Well, some of these stories about how we got there are, I think, to a large extent, mythology. They're revisionist history that was put in place after the fact. These horror stories about how couples had to make up, adulterous affairs that never happened and things like that. This is something that the bar associations cooked up. I'm not sure how much truth there is really in that history. What's undoubted, what's beyond dispute, is that the no-fault divorce system was sold to the public under false pretenses. It was sold dishonestly to the public. We were told that it would be divorced by mutual consent. It was not divorced by mutual consent. It is unilateral divorce. It is forced divorce. It is divorce. Basically, one spouse can dissolve the marriage contract for any reason or no reason. In other words, the marriage contract is simply not a enforceable contract in the law. It's a violation of the contract clause of the U.S. Constitution, in fact. So what they basically did, Maggie Gallagher called it the abolition of marriage. And in legal terms, that's precisely what it was. It was the abolition of marriage as a legally enforceable contract. So basically, if you want out of the marriage, you just walk away, and the judge will ratify what you've done. And your action in abrogating the contract in without grounds, your action committing adultery and deserting the home, any of that has no bearing on whether you get the children, whether you get the assets of the marriage. You can unilaterally break the contract, you can have affairs, and you can still get custody of the children. And overwhelmingly, of course, it's mothers that move these divorces because they know that they will get the children, and they will get generous child support awards. Although in some instances the roles are reversed, and the father perpetrates it and gets the rewards for it.
Yeah. So when did this? I know supposedly Ronald Reagan signed the first no-fault divorce law. Is that true?
That's correct. Yeah, in 1969, and he later regretted it. He expressed regret for having done so. I don't think he really understood it. I don't think anybody understood it. There was no debate at the time. There's never been any debate since. In 1969, we were obsessed with Vietnam, with the civil rights movement, with the campus unrest, with Woodstock, and so forth. Everybody's attention was on that, and the culture was very tolerant of sexual experimentation, sexual liberation. And this was something that the feminists actually had cooked this up decades earlier in the 1940s. They had drafted these laws, and they were just looking for an opportunity to slip them in. And they did. They slipped them in the late 60s, early 70s. Nobody really understood what they were for. There was one suit in the Texas legislature where the Texas legislature was sued by an attorney for deceptively passing the law deceptively, claiming that it was divorce by mutual consent, when in fact there was no such thing. It was divorce, unilateral divorce, without any grounds.
Yeah, I mean that really what it is. No fault. It sounds like no fault insurance.
That's where it came from. It was pioneered by car insurance.
But it's but at least in insurance we know there was an accident. It's somewhere along the lines. At least you're fine. But there doesn't even have to be like an incident here.
No, that's correct.
It's like anybody who wants to, and I always I've been down on the church for a long time. In their teachings on marriage, and you go listen to any church sermon series on marriage, and they always say marriage isn't a contract; it's a covenant. It's way more than a contract. And I would say, wait a minute, that's not true. Marriage in America is less than a contract.
Yes,
because you can actually, if you have a contract, you can actually enforce it. Whereas if you're married, you basically have zero rights in that. Essentially, there's no rights whatsoever. And
that's correct. Yeah. The churches. These are the church's weasel words. They talk about it being a covenant rather than a contract, and it's far more important and so forth. Just as you say, and in fact, the churches use this as an excuse to do nothing. Mm-hmm. They consecrate a marriage. They claim that this is before God and witnessed by the congregation and so forth, and it's inviolable until death do us part and all that. And then when the state tears up the contract, the churches do nothing. They don't intervene on behalf of the aggrieved party or the wronged party or both parties. They do absolutely nothing. It's the most shameful thing I've ever seen by churches, and to me it explains why people are walking away from churches in huge numbers and why people don't go to church, because when it comes to mean something to them in the course of their lives, their children, their livelihood, their home, and the church is looking out the window and refuses to do anything about it. Then people conclude that the church is useless, and they're right in many ways.